Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Pixel, and in today's video, we're going to be going over remote events. This tutorial is going to be very helpful for those who need to learn how to make sure their game is filtering enabled. But before we begin, make sure you join my Discord. Link will be in the description. My Discord allows you guys to talk to other new developers about things you may be working on. It also allows you to get help if your game is not working. Remember, the link will be in the description. Also, a side note, I try my best to remember to put all the scripts in the description of my videos. It isn't necessary for today's video since we're learning about scripting. It isn't about what I'm making, but about how what I make can impact your game significantly. Alright, let's get on with the tutorial. So, many of you may be asking, what is filtering enabled? Filtering enabled is a form of anti-exploiting Roblox has implemented. It basically disables client modification of server values, or in simpler words, the client can't make changes to the game. Obviously, you want filtering enabled to prevent your game from being hacked or exploded. Sadly, now it's a requirement to have your game filtering enabled. It will warn the player before entering the game and may not even display your game to younger players on Roblox. So it's just best to get into the habit of making your game filtering enabled. Like I said, the client can't edit the server, but in most cases we need to. That is where remote events come along. Remote events are designed for one-way communication between the server and the client. This message can be directed from one client to the server, from the server to a particular client, or from the server to all clients. Now, let's get into some scripting. I'm going to go over the basics of how remote events work, as well as the uses for them. We're going to create a button that when we step on, it'll fire a remote event from the server to the client. Insert a part and resize it to your likings. Make sure that anchored is turned on. You can turn can collide off if you don't want. I want it off, so I'm going to turn it off. You can set the color of your button to whatever you like. Name it button. And now we have our button. But before we get into scripting our button, go to replicated storage and we're going to insert a folder. Replicated storage is a type of storage that you can use in your game where the client and the server can both access it. Say the server storage, people like to put things in there, but only the server can access it from a local or a regular script. So now that we have our folder, go ahead and name it remote events. Next, we're going to insert a remote event, and you can just go ahead and name this event. This is our new remote event that we're going to be using in today's tutorial. So, before we begin scripting the button, go over to your starter GUI and insert a screen GUI. A screen GUI is basically the main of what you need for your player. So if you insert a text button into the starter GUI, it will not pop up. It needs to be in a GUI. We're going to be inserting a label, a text label, into the screen GUI. Resize it to your liking, and I'm going to set text scaled on so that it's big and we can see it. We're not going to be working with that at this moment. We're going to be working with our button now. So hit the white arrow and insert yourself a regular script. We're going to assign some variables. I've talked about variables in the past, in my past videos. It basically allows us to set a name to an object or a value. So the first one we're going to set is replicated storage. Game get service, clearly just it gets the service. Since this is a service, we just do that to be nice, I guess. It's just formal and should just get in get in the habit of using get service when you're accessing anything inside of a game. Not workspace, that isn't necessary. We're going to make another variable that is going to represent our remote event. So we're going to use our replicated storage variable, and we're going to do .remote event. So the dot in scripting, or the period, it basically means we're going inside of it. So in replicated storage, we're now going in and setting this to represent our remote events folder. And you guessed it, we are going to set a variable to our event. So remote events.event. So variables can be used in other variables, but it has to be in order. So you cannot have this one as the first one and then call this variable because this variable hasn't been set yet. So if we just put this up here, we would get an error because we don't know what this is. Now that we have that, we're also going to set another variable which is representing our debounce. Debounce, it allows us to give a weight when something, or we usually use it in a function. So when a function is fired, we use debounce in a method that I will show you in a second that basically gives the function a wait before it can be fired again. So the function we're going to be using for our button is script.parent.touched. Touched is the function, script.parent represents our button. If you hit enter after you type this, it'll automatically put an end with this here. But inside these little parentheses, we're going to put hit. Hit represents basically what fired this event, or basically, in other words, what touched this button. You can set this to wherever you want, but I usually set it to hit because it's more practical, I guess. So we're going to check to see if hit.parent has a humanoid. So we're going to do find first child humanoid. So find first child, it looks for the first child of our hit.parent, which would represent us. But this can also be set off by other objects that have touched this. So we're going to check to see if whatever hit it, so hit.parent, the parent of hit, if they contain humanoid. Humanoid is something that's inside of the player, that it's inside of all Roblox players. You don't need to add it in, it will automatically be there. That's how you detect if a player has touched something or if a player has set something off. Make sure that the H in humanoid is capitalized, since I get many messages saying why doesn't my script work and humanoid is not with a capitalized H. Everything you see has to be the exact way you see it. For variable names, it doesn't really matter. But when you're looking for something that's specific, capital letters matter. You cannot put a lowercase e for event because it's a uppercase E. So make sure everything is just matching. So now, the if statement basically means if the player has a humanoid, then we're going to continue on the script. If it doesn't, it's just going to end it. We don't need to do anything to say to end. It's just automatically going to end and not do anything. We're also going to do another if statement to see if debounce equals false. And we do equal because honestly, I really don't know, but I think it's only because you could change the first one to be greater than, less than. Putting that little squiggle, I think it means does not equal false. So we just do equal. So if that equals false, then we're actually just going to set it to true. So like I said, we're going to do our script, but since scripts run so fast, we're going to put a wait. So you can put wait 0.5. Make sure your script is before the wait. So there isn't a wait before the touch. So yeah. So during this wait, debounce will be true. So if the player hits it while debounce is true, nothing's going to happen since it's true. And it won't continue if it's true. It'll only continue if it's false. So we're going to do event fire client. This function right here is for a remote event. It's going to base it. So fire client obviously means going to fire the client. We're going to fire the event, and it's going to prioritize the client. So the client is expecting this message. You cannot do fire. You can't do fire server. Yeah, that's what. You can't not do fire server from server. I don't think that's not how it works. So after that, we're going to set debounce to be false. But in here, make sure that you put player. And we didn't set player yet. So we're going to do local player equals game.players, which is something that's inside our game, which represents all the players, colon get player from character hit.parent. So since this is inside of this if statement, we already know that this is a person. So what touched it is a person, and Hit.parent represents the player or the character. So we're getting the player from the character since those are two different things. The character represents the physical placement of the character. So what you see in game, that's your character. Your player would be something that you store values in for like leader stats and whatnot. So that's that. We just have to set this so we know what client we're looking for. So now that we have that script set up, we're going to go inside of the starter GUI, make sure that we have our text label. We're going to insert a local script. You can go back over to your button script and copy over these first 3 variables, highlighting them by holding left click, swipe over, hit Control-C to copy, go back over to your local script. There should be a tab up at the top. You can delete the print hello world and paste it in since we're going to be using these same variables. So we're going to do event. So now we're getting our event, our remote event, dot on client event, connect function. So this script is always going to be looking out to see if this is being fired. Since this is a client script and we're going from server to client, the server is prioritizing the client. So there's another thing called fire all clients where this player wouldn't be necessary, where it would fire all the clients. But since we're just doing fire client and we have our player, it's gonna like basically say, hey, I need this one player to have this certain thing. Since if you put fire all clients, if someone hit this button, everyone's thing would say remote fired. That could be something you want, but in this case, no. So there's nothing else that we have to do to make sure that the player is our player. It's just gonna it's only the script's only gonna detect if the client was set off or the event was set off if the server script wants it to. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna set the text of our text label to event fired. We're gonna do a wait, and then we're gonna set it to nothing, so you can just do 2 speech marks with nothing inside. So if we hop into game, as you can see, as we step on the button, it fires the remote event and the GUI picks it up and changes the text. The reason we use remote events is because we cannot change the player's UI directly from the server. We need to use a remote event since it allows them to communicate. Think of it as the server telling the client to change this text. There are many different ways you can use remote events. Almost everything you do in Roblox can be changed or altered or can use a remote event in some way to make it more efficient. Tools are a great example since you need a remote event if you want to have the tool do something on the server. Things like player stats and player data is all on the server, so if you're using a tool to edit those things, such as if you're making a simulator, then you're going to need a remote event. So all in all, basically anything that requires the server to get the client to show or do something, or getting the client to get the server to do something. Next, we're going to reverse it and have the client telling the server something. Remove the text label and insert a text button. We're going to be using this text button to fire the remote event, but this time we're going to fire it from the client. I'm just going to drag my button here and make it a little bit bigger. The script inside the button is not needed, yet you can still leave it there. Go inside of your local script, and again, we're going to need those same variables. You can jump back into your button script if you want, or you can just retype them, whatever floats your boat or whatever you feel like doing at this time. So now that we have that, we're going to make a function. This function is going to fire when our button is clicked. This function, mouse button 1 click, is when you left click the button. This is a function solo of the button, so it's only a part of the button. You can't click a text label. 2 click would be right click, and 3 click would be the mouse wheel click. For those of you who do not know that, you can click the mouse button. It's not just to roll. So inside here, we're just going to do event fire server. So as you may notice, instead of event fire client, we're doing event fire server. So this is going to fire and start an event on the server, and then we can get on the server and detect when this remote event is fired. So go into your server script service, and we're going to insert a script. Oops, not a module script. A regular old script. And in this script, again, like I said, we're going to detect when the remote event is fired, but this time from the server. Again, go inside and copy these variables. Again, we're going to do event. Instead of on client event, we're going to do on server event. Connect, make it a function. And now we're going to just edit that same button we made. We're going to change the brick color. We're going to do brick color dot random. This is going to set a random color to our button. We're going to do a wait a quarter of a second, and then we're going to set it back to green. Instead of doing random, we do new, and inside these parentheses you can type your color. So we're going to do bright green. Now if we test, clicking this button should change the color of our button. It does. It kind of just flashes color. I don't really think you can see it that very well. I'll just turn on that. As you can see. Alright. So now, let's reflect on this tutorial. So now you guys know how to use a remote event, what they're for, how to properly filter enable your game, or get around the filtering enabled. Since if you try to do this without remote events, it will not work. There may be some scripts or methods where you can, like I said, with the string value, but it's just practical to use remote events. So again, it's kind of something you just got to tinker with and get used to. The more you use it, the more you'll realize what you can do with it. So whenever you're working on a script, think of the goal. Think of what that script's doing. If it involves anything about the server or client, your mind should jump straight to remote events, since that's what we're going to be using when we script. Awesome. That concludes our remote event tutorial. I hope you're finding my tutorials helpful. I work really hard to get these videos out for you guys. I appreciate all the support, and like always, keep scripting.